Alright, so today we're going to go over Chapter 7, which is sex determination and sex chromosomes. So we know that most diploid eukaryotes reproduce sexually. There are some that go through stages of sexual and asexual reproduction, but for the most part, sexual reproduction is involved in some way. And all eukaryotic organisms will go through a process of meiosis to produce their gametes to ensure that you have genetic consistency throughout the generations. In most species, it's very obvious, very visible, the difference between the two sexes, male and female. And then these two sexes have very distinct morphological characteristics, and this is called phenotypic dimorphism. There's also, on a molecular level, a difference between male and female as far as the composition of their chromosomes is concerned. So, like in the case of humans, we have females have two X chromosomes and males have an X and a Y chromosome. And the X and the Y is a pair is called a heteromorphic chromosomes. So even though you have these designated sex chromosomes, it's really the genes involved in sex determination are actually present on both the sex chromosomes and the autosomes. Usually what it is the genes that are on the sex chromosomes will determine which genes on the autosomes get expressed. So talking about sexual differentiation, we have what's called primary and secondary sexual differentiation. So the primary sexual differentiation is just simply the gonads. So for mammals, it would be that females have ovaries and males have testes. And of course, this is the site of the gamete formation. Everything else, the outer appearance of the organisms, most of that's just based on hormones. So the things that make a male appear male, so it's broad chest, deep voice, narrow hips, facial hair, all those things are mostly based on the expression of testosterone, and all the things that make a female, like breast and narrow waist and round hips, and that's a lot of that's expression of estrogen. So just a little bit of terminology. The term unisexual or dioecious or gonochoric, this just means that you have either male or female reproductive organs for each individual. So humans are unisexual. Bisexual, monoecious, or hermaphroditic means that an individual can have both male and female reproductive organs. So plants are a good example of that. These individuals can self-fertilize. An individual that's intersex means that it has some kind of intermediate sexual condition between male and female. So these are usually sterile. So just some examples of some different organisms and the cycles that they go through. With green algae, it spends most of its life in a haploid stage where it just reproduces asexually. But if it gets in a pickle where the conditions aren't very favorable for life, then the cells will differentiate into these structures called isogametes. And two isogametes will fuse to form a diploid zygote. And the purpose of this is these zygotes are just more robust. They have a better survival rate in these unfavorable conditions, and so it gives them a little bit of an edge, a little bit of an advantage. But if the conditions get more favorable, then the zygote will undergo meiosis to produce the haploid vegetative cells, and they'll just go back to reproducing asexually. Now, what's interesting about this is when the isogametes are formed, they look the same, but chemically they're actually different, and you have plus and minus groups. And a minus will always fuse with a plus. You can't have two pluses or two minuses fusing to form a zygote. In corn, now the book goes into a lot of detail about corn and how it reproduces, and we're not going to go into that much detail, but just know that all these plants alternate between like a haploid gametophyte and a diploid sporophyte stage. Then of course meiosis produces the gametophytes, and then fertilization forms the sporophytes. So in corn, the sporophyte stage is the one that's more dominant, and these plants have both male and female structures on the same plant. And so this is how the process goes. You have you can see here an adult plant with both a stamen and a pistil, so it has both male and female structures. They undergo meiosis to produce haploid gametes. The gametes fuse through the process of pollination, and if you want to know in detail that whole process, you can read in the book. It goes into great detail about it. And then each individual kernel could potentially grow into an adult plant. Now, Caenorhabditis elegans, this is the nematode. They're kind of neat because they have two sexual phenotypes, but they're not male and female. They're actually males, which have testes only, and then hermaphrodites that have both testes and ovaries. And so the hermaphrodites can actually self-fertilize and produce progeny, of which most are going to be more hermaphrodites, and they do produce a few males. But mating between males and hermaphrodites will produce equal numbers of males and hermaphrodites. So you can see here, this is what it's talking about. You have a hermaphrodite here. It can self-fertilize, and when it does, you get less than 1% of the progeny are male. But when a male and a hermaphrodite undergo sexual reproduction, you get a 50-50 of the hermaphrodites and the males. Now, with the chromosomes in nematodes, hermaphrodites have 2 X chromosomes, so it's kind of like I guess what you would call the female, but they're not really female, they're hermaphrodites. But the male only has 1 X chromosome, so there's no Y chromosome at all. And sex is determined by a ratio of X chromosomes to autosomes. So hermaphrodites have a 1-to-1 ratio, or a ratio of 1.0 of X chromosomes to autosomes, and males, since they only have 1 chromosome, it's a 1-to-2, so they have a ratio of 0.5. Okay, in the butterfly, it's very similar to that. You have that same XX-XO mode of sex determination. In males, they have only 1 X chromosome, and so their gametes, you can see down here, will either just have 6 autosomes or 6 autosomes and 1 X chromosome. And females have their gametes will have 6 autosomes and always will have that X chromosome. So you get a 50-50 male to female progeny. Males will end up, their diploid cells will end up with 1 X chromosome, and female diploid cells will end up with 2 X chromosomes. Now, a milkweed bug is more like humans. It has the XXXY mode of sex determination. So females are XX and males are XY. And so down here you can see you get that same 50-50 male to female ratio, or 1-to-1 sex ratio. But it's because females will always donate that X chromosome, and males will either donate 50% of the time they'll donate at Y, and 50% of the time they'll donate at X. Okay, so just some terminology. Like we've already shown, males and females are going to differ in their composition of sex chromosomes. Most of the time, you're going to have they're going to have different sex chromosomes. For example, the male has 1 X and 1 Y chromosome, and females have 2 X chromosomes. So one sex is going to produce 2 different types of gametes. So in males, human males, they'll always have a gamete with 22 autosomes and 1 X chromosome, or 22 autosomes and 1 Y chromosome. And because of that, because they have different forms of gametes, they're considered the heterogametic sex, or they're considered to be heterogametous. Females, on the other hand, all their gametes are going to look the same because they're always going to have 22 autosomes and 1 X chromosome. So females are considered the homogametous sex, and they're homogametic. Now, birds are always opposite of us, it seems like. In birds, it's the females that's the heterogametic sex, and the males are the homogametic sex. So to avoid confusion, we use different letters when we talk about these animals that are backwards. So we say that females have one Z and one W sex chromosome, and males have two Zs. Okay, so that's it for this first half of the lecture. This was a pretty short lecture. The rest of the chapter we'll talk about the Y chromosome and how it makes in humans how it makes males male, and we'll talk about fruit flies and also about environmental factors that can determine sex.